Tommy Rees, I really want to spend the next few minutes getting to know you a little bit and going through kind of your resume, your coaching experience, your entire lived coaching experience, but mainly as a play caller.
Yep.
I think there's a misconception that you're a first-time play caller. That's not the case here. 3 seasons at Notre Dame, 1 season at Alabama, which I think Kevin Stefanski joked is like 20 years when you coach for Nick Saban.
Right.
It's 20 years in a lifetime. And then of course recently the back half of the 2025 season with the Cleveland Browns and Kevin Stefanski.
Right.
From your perspective, what are some key things that you took with you from all 3 of those stops?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, I started calling plays at a relatively young age. I mean, I was 27 or 28 the first year there at Notre Dame, and we had a very veteran team. It was COVID, which made things a little bit more difficult, but we had a very veteran team, and we had a very clear identity on who we were and how we were going to move forward. And for us, it was staying within that identity and maximizing what we were already really good at with finding some wrinkles to be improved from the year before. My next 2 years at Notre Dame, it was like a new team each year.
Yeah.
So you found ways to pivot and, continue to maximize who your players were and ways to put them in position to have success, and felt like as a staff, we did a nice job of that. You grow as a play caller, right? Like as a position coach, you want to call plays, and then you get the opportunity to call plays, and there's reps that need to be had in terms of like finding your flow and finding and understanding how things work for, the staff and the players, and getting everybody on the same page. And then I transitioned to Alabama, and I really walked into a room that the staff was all intact. Like, right. The coaching staff that was there the year before, 90% of it stayed consistent. I brought, one guy with me off the field, and I was learning a new system. I was learning what Alabama's offense was, and, had some wrinkles here and there. And, that year for me was about as rewarding as a year I've ever had in football. The year didn't start off probably as strong as the way we wanted it to. And, we ended up winning the SEC down here in Atlanta, and, had a chance to go to the Rose Bowl and play in the semifinal. But the way we persevered through that year and really carved out an identity as the year went on, and carved out the identity of like how to call and get our quarterback into rhythm and get our offense into feeling good about what we were doing was, first of all, a great effort from our whole staff, and then just a great effort from our players to carve that out as the year went on. Then coach retires, and I'd push back, like, it's hard. There were times where it was hard calling plays for him, but like I wouldn't trade it for a minute. And 20 years is a long time. Then I come to Cleveland as the tight end coach, and that, I will say, in terms of like the longevity of my career and hoping to call plays for a long time, like that probably is going to help me as much as anything in my young career, just because taking a step out of the quarterback room, taking a step out of the play calling role, and just seeing how everything needs to be tied together, seeing how important it is to have clear lines of communications to all the positions, to make sure that things are streamlined and done at a high level. Like that year in the tight end room, tight ends are a hard position to coach now. They got to do it all.
They do.
But that's going to end up benefiting me, I think, throughout my career. I'm going to look back and say that year of not calling plays and not being in a coordinator seat is going to benefit me in a great way. And, I was fortunate that Kevin gave me that opportunity. It really was. And then last year, look, the communication with Kev was always at a really high level. When I got the coordinator job, when play calling was going to happen, all that, like he was pretty straightforward with me, and we were kind of always building towards that. And, he made the decision when he did, and made the decision, moving forward when he did. But, look, I lean on Kev to help, in my, first couple of weeks there of getting back into the flow of things. Like Kev's been great towards me, and by the end of it, really felt like we were back into a flow and doing things at a high level for us as a staff.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that leads into one of my questions. Is I sat down with Kevin Stefanski when he was first hired, and I kind of talked to him a little bit about the 2019 year that he was with the Minnesota Vikings and how that was his first true full-time play calling. And he made the comment about how important that year was from the position of like being able to install a Gary Kubiak offense with Gary Kubiak sitting in the room. Yeah. And he kind of said that a goal of what he wants to be for you in this role is almost like a caddy in golf, where he's like, I'm there to talk about the whole. I'm there to talk about which clubs to use, when to use them, and that he wants to be the greatest asset he can be for you on game day. As you're looking ahead to continuing this partnership between the two of y'all, what are some things that y'all learned and also processes that y'all put in place about how to work together?
Yeah, I think like everything you just said speaks volumes to who Kevin is and his role. And I said it in there earlier, like I went to Cleveland to work for Kevin. I mean, that's about as straightforward as I can be. Like there are certain coaches that you look at and say, hey, I want an opportunity to learn from them, be in that system, be in that culture. And that was really what, drove me to go to Cleveland after Alabama. And that opinion has only grown in terms of how I feel about Kevin. And so he is that for me. Like he's a great, caddy's a tough term for me to say, but he's a great mentor,
right.
And he's a great resource, and he's very supportive in that way, which, goes a long way in terms of how we build things. I think, for me, it's a balance of, making sure that that we're always working well together, and then also being convicted on certain things. And then, on game day, he does a great job of, picking and choosing spots. But at the end of the day, he says, hey, Tommy, trust what you're calling and go ahead. And that, as a play caller, is really important when you feel like the head coach has your back and in full support. Like that part of the relationship really matters. And I will say this, like everybody wants to talk about play calling. Like being a coordinator, there's so much more that goes into that. Like it's leadership of the staff, leadership of the players, being clear in your lines of communication with both, staff and players, putting together a good plan week to week, which, Kevin and I work, really hand in hand in. And like everybody talks play calling. That's just what product everybody gets to see. Mm-hmm. There's so much that goes into it on the front end that matters just as much.
I'm glad that you mentioned that as well, because player development is such a big thing about what Kevin was talking about. And there are a lot of really interesting pieces a part of this offense in terms of development and where this offense wants to go. I know you've been around, veteran quarterbacks, you've been around young quarterbacks, you've been around veteran players, young players. When it comes to teaching and coaching and developing individuals, what are your tactics that you fall back on?
Yeah, I think you got to figure out, everybody learns a little bit differently.
Right.
Everybody has a little bit of a different way to get them going, like what makes them tick, what's going to reach them, what's going to get the best out of them in a mentality standpoint. So you got to learn the player, you got to build a level of trust. At the end of the day, if you can prove to the players, hey, these guys can help me get better, these guys can improve me, and there's a very clear path to getting there, that goes a long way, especially, my first job in the NFL, I was 23, and the hardest question I had on the interview was, hey, you're 23, you have a 30-year-old receiver, how are you going to earn his respect? And I don't think the answer's changed. Like, if you can help these guys continue their career, if you can help them elevate their career, that's what they're all after. And so for us as a staff, like these first couple of weeks, and as we continue to build the offense, it's so important that we're all on the same page, that we have an immense amount of attention to detail in what we're doing. Like the players can feel that when everybody's speaking the same language, everybody has detail in how they're presenting, everything is systematic in the approach, like it's very clean and cut how we're trying to build things. That's what's going to get the players to respond and buy in. And then look, you got to let your personality take over to build a rapport and build those relationships. And when you can get that group going in the right direction, I think that's when things start to happen on the field.
So Matt Ryan, and I believe it was Kevin Stefanski's very first press conference, he laid the vision for what the football team was going to be, but he went unit by unit to a certain degree. And what he said about this offense was that it is going to be about the run game. And I think that there are a lot of coordinators, coaches out there that would be really, really excited to get a hold of this specific run game with Bijan Robinson, with a veteran presence along this offensive line that has played a lot of ball together. I know Kevin had spoken previously about kind of the marriage and the balance between what he wants to do with wide zone and gap. And fortunately, Bijan Robinson has been doing a lot of wide zone stuff very well recently and did a lot of gap stuff very well in college. Yep. What is your philosophy in the run game, and how do you feel like you can take it to the next level?
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same mentality. Like played quarterback, been in the quarterback room, but really like the offensive line and like that catalyst, like you learn pretty quickly how important that group is when you're in the game of football. And we're very fortunate to have a really good line here and a group of guys that are all made of the right things. I don't need to say too much about Bijan. I mean, he jumps off the screen, like he's a special player, a special human, and really excited to get to working with him and that rest of the group. But from a fundamental football standpoint, like everything has to start there because it sets up, with the other things that you want to do. I do believe like offensive football at its core is the ability to put the defense in conflict. And the greatest way to put them in conflict is for them not to know if it's run or pass, right? Make them play both, present things that look similarly, that have complements of one another. And, look, we are in the evaluation process of, hey, what are things that we know these guys can run wide zone. They've done it. You know what I mean? Like we see that. There might be a few, adjustments here and there, but for the most part, they're good. It's like what complementary pieces can we continue to build into this offense and get really good at so that we can keep a defense off schedule.
We have to talk about arguably the most important position in all of sports, at the quarterback position. And you have a young guy in Michael Penix Jr. who is coming back from knee surgery. And, there's a lot of talk about the quarterback position in Atlanta. But I just want to specifically ask you about Michael Penix. Yeah. And I know that you were in the college football playoff at the same time that he was. How have you seen him and his maturation, even in the short time that he's been in the league, compared to what maybe you saw in the college ranks?
I want to start with Michael as the guy. Like, I've had brief interactions with him thus far, really positive. I know coaches that have worked with him speak, so highly of him, and you feel that right away. I mean, a great person, made of the right things, and that's a really important starting point at that position. And, I think like you watch the film and there's like, you see all the natural talent, you see all the arm talent, you see all the ability to play from the pocket, stretch the field, both outside the numbers and vertically, and, throws well with anticipation. Like you see all the raw talent. Our job as coaches is to give them the process to be able to maximize that all the time. And that's really what we're after at the end of the day, is like allow that talent to shine through by making him, think as clearly as he needs to on game day, and make things so streamlined that he feels like he always has answers in his pocket. In college, like he elevated all the programs he was at, winner at Indiana, winner at UW, and I believe if we can get him, to streamline and play at a high level and do our job as coaches, we'll prove that he's a winner, period. You know what I mean? That's who he is in his DNA, and it's our job to make sure we get him there.
I'm glad you bring that up too, because I know the number one priority for Michael Penix is to get healthy physically, but a major part of the piece of what all of Michael Penix is getting him 100% mentally, with a new scheme coming in, kind of with everything that he's gone through. So as you're sitting there and you're developing a relationship with him, as you're installing what you want this offense to be, what are some of the checkpoints of what you need to see from Michael Penix to say that, okay, once he's ready 100% physically, he's also ready 100% mentally?
Yeah, I don't know if there are like specific checkpoints that you point to, as much as, we again get him healthy, and then as we get him back healthy and you start to ramp up, you just wanted to, once they start kind of owning the offense and feeling like they got control of it, and they're able to, conduct meetings and talk to the players and get everybody on the same page, and you feel like he's out there playing fast and playing free and making good decisions, like that's when things start clicking. And you're right, there's a lot of work to be done before that time comes, but I know we have the staff to make sure that that's clearly communicated, and I know Mike's chomping at the bit to get going too.
Last question, and I'll get you out of here, but collectively, let's say we sit down in these seats a year from now, what is it that you want people to be talking about when it comes to this offense?
Man, I try not to put expectations on things. If Coach Saban were here, he'd say expectations lead to letdowns, and try not to put those things out there. I think we want to be an offense that again continues to keep a defense off balance, right? If you can say, hey, they have complementary pieces, they have things that they do that present challenges to a defense that's stressing their rules, stressing the way they have to play. I would say that's what we want to hang our hat on.
I like it.
Cool.
Thank you so much for sitting down with me.
Yeah, appreciate it.
it.
Yep.